Trump's clock is ticking. Peace in Ukraine or a political failure for the US? March or never. Washington is pushing events forward. A peace deal and a reboot of power in Ukraine. The plan for this spring? Zelensky takes a tough stance. No deals without security guarantees. Donbas and the armed forces are stumbling blocks that could undermine peace. Dmitriev's secret package. Russia is sending signals to America. The Kremlin has come up with another scare tactic. Medvedev threatens the world with nuclear winter. I'll tell you all the details in a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today, and I am Victoria Panchenko and the latest events. Something is coming, Trump is running out of time, and the statements are getting sharper. Aboard Air Force One on the way to Florida. The US president repeated several times about good talks regarding peace in Ukraine, but without any details.
We are having very good negotiations with Russia and Ukraine. We are having very good negotiations. Maybe something will come of it.
Sensational news. The US is seeking a peace agreement as early as March and wants elections in Ukraine as soon as possible. Reuters reports this, citing sources. At the same time, according to them, these deadlines are likely to be pushed back due to disagreements between the parties over territories. Two sources told the agency that US and Ukrainian officials have also discussed the possibility of holding a referendum in May. Reuters sources believe that the deadlines proposed by the US are unrealistic. Thus, the Central Election Commission stated in January that under the current wartime conditions, organizing elections in Ukraine would take about 6 months. Holding such elections would require changes to the legislation, as they are prohibited during martial law in Ukraine. In addition, it would be a costly process. The Ukrainian side insists on a ceasefire for the entire duration of the election campaign, which Moscow does not agree to. Kiev's position is that nothing can be agreed upon until security guarantees for Ukraine are provided by the US and its partners.
At first, we were ready for a ceasefire. It is Russia that must agree to a ceasefire. All the conditions are absolutely clear. They are outlined in the 20-point plan.
Zelensky believes that security guarantees should come from the US before any other documents.
Of course, everything can be signed simultaneously. But if we were looking for ways for Ukraine, for society, to be more confident about its future, to be more certain of America's support, to be more confident that not only Europe, but first and foremost there will be America's backstop, and to be more certain that Russian aggression in the future will be minimized, if we talk about this, in my opinion, this is exactly how we need to create a de-escalatory atmosphere and strengthen Ukraine.
Therefore, in Zelensky's opinion, security guarantees should be signed first.
This is my position, and I am speaking about it absolutely openly. Whatever will be, because these are security guarantees for America and Europe. And so, everything depends on the will of the United States of America.
According to Reuters sources, American negotiators stated that in the near future, Trump is likely to focus on domestic affairs in the US as the November midterm elections for Congress approach. And this means that US high-ranking officials will have less time and political capital for efforts to resolve the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. That is why there is a need to hurry with reaching a peace agreement. At the same time, any agreements are currently highly uncertain, since there is still no consensus on the clause regarding the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the Donetsk region. What is Moscow demanding and what is Kiev opposing? There is also no agreement on the issue of control over the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant. According to sources, Moscow does not agree with the American proposal to transfer control of the plant to the United States.
Moscow insists that it controls the plant and is ready to sell electricity to Ukraine at low prices. Official Kyiv does not agree to this.
Russia is ready for international cooperation, but the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant must remain Russian. This statement was made by the head of Rosatom, Alexei Likachov, regarding the Ukrainian nuclear power plant, which the Russians have occupied and effectively turned into a military base.
We once again emphasized, on the one hand, our absolute openness to cooperation, to the possible export of electricity beyond the borders of the Russian Federation. And this export, this international trade in electricity, we are ready to carry out in alliance, including with American partners.
According to the head of the organization of the terrorist country, the issues of operating the nuclear power plant, its ownership, and ensuring its independence must remain with the Russian Federation, because supposedly there is no other way. At the same time, Likachov hid behind not only Russian legislation, which illegally claims Ukrainian territories as its own, but also the norms and rules of the IAEA, as well as considerations of common sense.
Since safety is the primary key element when developing plans for the use of any nuclear energy facility.
But the head of Rosatom conveniently forgot to mention how the Russians shell Ukrainian nuclear facilities and how they seized the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant by force, repeatedly bringing it to a complete blackout. Crimea also continues to trouble the occupiers. In turn, Zelensky commented on Russia's demands to recognize the peninsula as Russian.
I believe that most likely, Russia is sending a signal to America. Recognize Crimea, knowing that Ukraine will not recognize it, and understanding that Ukraine has influence in the European segment.
He added that Ukraine will not support agreements that contradict the constitution of Ukraine or Ukrainian law.
Even when it comes to compromises, they still have to be fair. Yes, probably, some things in the relationship between America and Russia do not concern us. But if in any way they affect our national interests, the Ukrainian people, or our territories, we would like to be aware of it, so that there are no problems later, and it definitely should not happen against our interests.
Moreover, Zelensky states that there is a possibility of documents being signed between America and the Russian side. Intelligence is aware of the Dmitriev package. According to the president, the volume of the economic cooperation package between America and Russia is about $12 trillion.
There are also various signals, both in the media and elsewhere, that issues related to Ukraine may also be included. For example, concerning our sovereignty and Ukraine's security. We are making it clear that Ukraine will not support even the potential agreements between the parties. About us, without us.
Interestingly, the Kremlin has already started talking about the next stages of negotiations between Ukraine and the United States. The spokesperson for the Russian ruler, Dmitry Peskov, stated that the next round of negotiations to end the war in Ukraine will take place soon. However, the venue will not be the United States. Earlier, President Volodymyr Zelensky reported that within the framework of the negotiation process to resolve the war, further meetings are already being planned. And most likely they will take place in America. From
what can already be said, further meetings are planned in the near future. Most likely in America. According to
him, Ukraine is ready for all working formats that will help bring peace closer and make it reliable and lasting. At the same time, Russia must be deprived of the appetite to continue fighting.
It is important that this war ends in such a way that Russia receives no reward for its aggression. This is one of the key principles that restores and guarantees true security. I thank all the partners who support us in this.
According to the communiqué, following the results of the trilateral negotiations, on February 4th through 5th in Abu Dhabi, delegations from the US, Ukraine, and Russia discussed methods for implementing a ceasefire and monitoring the cessation of hostilities. While diplomats search for ways to end the war in Ukraine, US and Russian military officials are resuming regular consultations. The main goal of these contacts is to ensure greater transparency and de-escalation. Dialogue with Russia was frozen at the end of 2021. This decision coincided with the expiration of the key nuclear treaty New START and the intensification of peace initiatives regarding Ukraine. This was reported by the Washington Post.
This decision became a side effect of ongoing efforts aimed at ending the war in Ukraine. On the same day, the treaty expired. New START, which regulated the number and types of nuclear weapons held by the United States and Russia.
US President Donald Trump called for the creation of a new nuclear arms treaty with Russia.
Instead of extending the New START treaty, a bad deal for America, which, among other things, is being grossly violated. We must instruct our nuclear experts to develop a new, improved, and modernized treaty, one that can be effective in the long term. In turn,
the deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council and former President Dmitry Medvedev published a scare story about nuclear war. This is due to the recent expiration of the Russian-American Nuclear Arms Control Treaty. Medvedev couldn't resist boasting about the complete lack of any restraints for Russia on the nuclear issue.
That's all there is to it. For the first time since 1972, Russia, formerly the USSR, and America do not have a treaty limiting strategic nuclear forces. All of that is in the past now.
Medvedev added a screenshot from the TV series Game of Thrones, showing the character Night King, the leader of the army of the undead, hinting that winter is coming. Obviously, this is meant to symbolize nuclear winter, with which Moscow is trying to intimidate the world. The results of the negotiations in Abu Dhabi, we are seeing them right now. In Moscow, they are talking about the attempted assassination of General Alexeyev, who oversaw private military companies and the use of Novichok abroad. And that's far from all. Here are the details. The second day of peace talks in Abu Dhabi between Ukraine, the US and Russia ended with an agreement to exchange 314 prisoners.
It's all good, Mom. I don't have much time right now. I'm home. Everything's fine. I'm alive and well.
According to optimistic forecasts from the American side, the war is about to end very soon. After all, as Trump constantly insists, Putin really wants peace.
If you ask me whether only Putin is interested in ending the war, I'll tell you yes. In ending the war as quickly as possible. He wants it because the Russian economy is not in the right condition, which would allow him to pursue a long war. But he wants the war to end with a Ukrainian defeat and a defeat for the West. That's what he wants too. And so far, that's not happening.
Agreements on territories are still being discussed. Work on security guarantees is almost complete. The agreement on prosperity is at the final stage. I think that the people of Ukraine are now hoping that we will soon finish the final negotiations. From
the Ukrainian side, things look less optimistic, but the Ukrainian delegation continues to push and insist on its interests. Putin has to...
When a structural element is subjected to an immense amount of force, it is often expected that the material will eventually begin to yield and bend under the intense pressure. This inherent flexibility allows the object to absorb the energy of the impact, demonstrating a level of resilience and endurance even when pushed to its physical limits by the surrounding environment. At the very least, it signals to the Americans that Putin has no serious intentions. They understand perfectly well that the clown cannot decide matters of war and peace. That's when he sends serious people there, like a general.
Perhaps that's why the head of Russian GRU avoids talking about what is actually being discussed at the negotiations.
Overall, how was the atmosphere there? Give us a few words.
Well, everyone said it was constructive. Everyone understands everything.
Everyone understands everything. In what sense?
In the most direct sense. Everything is very complicated. You see what a turbulent world we live in.
And at the same time, in the middle of the Russian capital in broad daylight, there is an assassination attempt on his deputy, Lieutenant General Vladimir Alexeyev. He is still alive for now, but with multiple gunshot wounds and in serious condition.
I'm asking you, please reconsider. Don't do this now because there could be no greater blow to Russia's image. Right now, it's impossible to imagine a bigger blow to its armed forces. Such a provocation could only have been carried out by the enemies of the Russian Federation.
Oleksiy is a true traitor to his homeland, since he was born and raised in the Vinnytsia region, and his parents are buried there.
Afghanistan, Chechnya, Syria, Donbas, and the invasion of Ukraine are far from a complete list. That's his service record. Despite the fact that he left here more than 40 years ago, and his parents have passed away, he is still very well known here.
At the same time, Oleksiy is one of the organizers of missile and airstrikes on Ukraine, as well as the overseer of the so-called referendums in the temporarily occupied.
These expansive and multifaceted geographical regions encompass a wide variety of distinct administrative districts, sovereign nations, and diverse territories situated across every corner of the entire globe.
So it turns out that negotiations are one thing, but not a single war criminal will ever be completely safe from Ukrainian special services, even on the territory of the so-called Greater Russia.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Meanwhile, the United States is preparing to overthrow the government in Iran, likely in a manner similar to what was done in Venezuela. About the possible scenario of events and what Putin stands to lose from it, coming up next.
On the brink of a new war and a government overthrow, Donald Trump has stated that he is ready to repeat strikes on Iran and personally target the country's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, if today's negotiations do not satisfy him.
In my honest opinion, I would say that he really should be extremely concerned. As you know, they are negotiating with us.
As was learned the day before, the US and Iran have confirmed their readiness to meet for talks in Oman. At the same time, the positions of the parties are quite different. Tehran is only willing to discuss issues related to its nuclear program, but Washington wants to resolve all security issues in the region together.
a deal with Iran clearly won't work out for them because the Iranians, if we are to believe their supreme leader, they are not going to give up their nuclear program either. This will be a long, drawn-out negotiation, and they are not ready to discuss these issues in the negotiations. The next point's from Trump's ultimatum.
Let me remind you, as part of these negotiations, Trump is demanding that Iran abandon its long-range missiles, stop supporting terrorist organizations in the region, and also cease the violent suppression of protesters in Ukraine. In Tehran, these issues are considered internal affairs, and they have previously refused to coordinate them with the United States. Because of this, the American delegation doesn't even try to hide its skepticism.
Iran has expressed a desire to meet and discuss the issues. If they change their minds, that's fine with us as well. We believe it's better to meet and talk. I'm not sure that it's possible to reach an agreement with these people, but we will try to find out. We don't see any harm in trying to understand whether something can be done.
The American leader, however, is confident that something can indeed be achieved. While calling for negotiations, Trump fully allows for a new strike against Iran, one that would simply destroy a government incapable of making agreements. Moreover, the previous strike on Tehran's nuclear facilities also took place amid public calls for
The characters are currently engaging in a detailed conversation, sharing their unique perspectives and thoughts as they discuss the situation at hand through meaningful verbal communication. When the dates were announced, it was like, here you go, we're starting negotiations, sitting down at the table. 2 days before that, on October 13th, the Israeli operation against Iran began. Everyone hopes that this is also just a smokescreen and that something else will actually happen.
Analysts assure that it will definitely happen. The only question is the timing and scale of the attack. Further confirmation of this is the continued movement of American equipment closer to the shores of Iran.
There's the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln with F-18 and F-35 jets and 3 destroyers armed with Tomahawk cruise missiles. All of this, according to the Financial Times. And it's known that they are also moving Patriot missile systems, refueling aircraft and transport aviation. Well, in general, an absolutely incredible amount of force is being concentrated in the region, and various strike options are being discussed. Among the possible targets mentioned are, first and foremost, Iran's air defense systems, missile infrastructure, various depots and command centers, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, as well as the Basij, which is the secret police.
It is worth noting that Iran itself is also provoking the situation. The day before, the Americans even had to scramble their fighter jets to destroy an Iranian drone that was flying toward the aircraft carrier. This has also been documented.
A few hours after the drone was shot down, Iranian boats from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps tried to stop an American tanker in the Armutsky Strait. The situation had to be resolved with the help of the USS McFall. In other words, if things had gone a bit further, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps would have seized the American tanker. So they weren't just trying to stop it, but to capture it. Moreover, the tanker was sailing under the American flag with an American crew.
But the Iranians didn't dare to find out who was stronger, the American destroyer or their patrol boats. By the way, in such a situation, it would have been the perfect time for Tehran to remember its strategic agreement with Moscow. Well, in true fashion, they declared that they couldn't help. And despite their own losses from the possible fall of the Khamenei regime, they won't defend it from the US.
The fundamental problem they are facing right now is that they simply find themselves in a position where they have absolutely no resources, tools, or materials available to them to actually go about doing it in any meaningful or effective way whatsoever.
A pleasant bonus for Ukraine from a possible American operation in Iran would be a drop in Putin's revenues. After all, cooperation with Tehran allowed Moscow not only to obtain weapons, but also to circumvent Western.
The country has been facing a series of heavy economic sanctions for many years now. In the meantime, as these measures continue to take effect,
whether the US will strike Iran will become clear in the near future. If the negotiation process comes to a dead end, then Tomahawks will have the final say.
Russian gasoline is already more expensive than American, and this spring the gas station country is expecting another surge in car fuel prices. Thus, ordinary Russians are paying for Russia's war against Ukraine, and they will keep paying more and more.
Gasoline in Russia is now a luxury, not just fuel for getting around. Putin has played himself into a situation where petroleum products in Russia are now more expensive than in the US. Since 2026, Russians have had to pay more for a liter of diesel or 95 octane than Americans do.
Well, as for drivers, what can I say? Take advantage of the opportunity to fill up your tank every time, because next time you'll be paying a different price.
Yes, even today, a liter of fuel in the United States costs almost 5 Russian rubles less than in the aggressor country. And this gap is relentlessly growing. And that's all because, according to global oil prices, fuel prices are dropping in the US and other countries. But in Russia, the situation is completely the opposite. Gasoline just keeps steadily getting more expensive. Moreover, the fuel price rate is even outpacing the level of inflation.
Russian oil pricing is very unique. Oil prices go down, gasoline goes up. Oil prices go up, gasoline also goes up.
Kremlin greed is to blame for everything. The Russian government continues to base its calculations on unrealistic figures. Because of sanctions and as a result, with the drop in export revenues, Russian oil companies are left without super profits.
The Russian oil price will hover around $40. This means that the situation for the breadwinners is turning the other way around and a big hole is appearing. In other words, there is a shortfall in oil tax revenues for the budget, and the list of breadwinners has sharply narrowed.
But as for those living off the state, the Kremlin will only have more of them. Russian oil traders are covering their losses with Putin's permission at the expense of ordinary Russian taxpayers. In the
past year, oil companies received 900 billion rubles from the budget, almost $1 trillion. They gave money from the Russian budget to oil companies so they wouldn't raise gasoline prices, but they raised them anyway.
And it will only get worse. Analysts are unanimous in saying this. The forecasts for Russia's economy in the coming years are not encouraging. The average annual price of Brent oil in 2026 will only decline. Meanwhile, Russian oil traders will continue to inflate prices at gas stations, creating an artificial shortage.
In other words, oil companies will try to make up on the domestic market what they failed to earn abroad. They explain this with various difficulties like Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries. We see that they're as cunning as a spoiled child who nurses from 2 mothers. They received $1 trillion from the budget through the damper mechanism. And they raised prices. According to Rostat, gasoline increased by 11% in 2025. So I think that, of course, they won't let go of what's theirs. That's why we should expect more spikes in gasoline prices. They'll explain it with seasonal factors. Prices go up seasonally, but then they don't go down when the season ends. So in the end, it all comes down to everyone reaching into Russians' pockets, into their wallets.
It would seem everything is simple. If Putin and his oil oligarch buddies have nowhere to sell their oil on the world markets, it's the perfect time to focus on the domestic market. But is it really?
Well, of course, it can be refined domestically so that citizens have more gasoline, so that gasoline prices go down. But that's not as profitable from a business perspective.
Strange as it may sound, the more expensive and less accessible gasoline is in Russia, the better it is for the Kremlin.
Russia is doing everything it can to drive prices up, to make them rise faster, while at the same time pretending to fight rising prices. And that's the situation.
If things keep going this way, economists are certain that in just a year or two, most Russians will be trading their cars for horse-drawn carts again.
North Korea was copied from the Soviet Union, so now the Russian Federation will just copy North Korea? Makes sense. What are you looking at?
What do you think about the latest events? We're waiting for your comments. Stay tuned for more important updates and don't forget to like. Peaceful skies above your head.